So this tool was created for a very specific reason, and I will go through that in the beginning. So we will start with the problem statement, and then I will focus on how others do it. Then I'm going to talk a little bit on how we do it. And then I will introduce the toolkit with the API. I will show you a little bit about the XML formatting, which is used in the background, and then some examples and applications. And then at the end, I'm not showing any tutorials, but I'm actually going to ask you guys a question if you want to be involved in the process yourself. Okay, so problem statement. Imagine a situation where you have a big application, and that big application has hundreds of controls and indicators on the screen. It doesn't even need to have hundreds. It's enough that it has tens of controls and indicators. And then you have tens of user interface states possible. So depending on the logic of your application, your user interface should be in mode 1, let's say, or mode 2, mode 3, etc. So an easy situation where you can imagine that is resizing the user interface to fit different resolutions. If you want to swap between resolution 800 by 600, you're going to have one setup of the UI. Different resolution will have different default setup, right? Or another example of this can be you're trying to localize your user interface into different languages. Also, depending on the language selected by the user interface should swap. Or another example can be the color scheme of the user interface. Or another example can be dependent on what happens in the application. Let's say that you are measuring some input, and the input is above some critical threshold value, and only then an option to click and send an email to a user becomes available on the user interface. So there are multiple situations where something like this might happen. Sometimes this means handling hundreds of thousands of properties, user interface properties, so VI server properties, and for all of this, you have to do it essentially manually somewhere inside of your code. So that's a problem statement. What to do when you have that kind of situation. How do we do it, first of all? Well, like I said, we need to have multiple user interface properties on the block diagram. And usually, it takes a while. It takes a while to add all of those properties to the user interface. It takes a while to wire them. And imagine that you have to do all of this for multiple of these states that you have, for multiple of these controls. So it's manual calls, it's big, clunky, it doesn't fit on the screen. And you do a lot of code duplication, which leads to bugs. It's frustrating. You can introduce race conditions very easily. There is a lot of wiring. Frequently, this code for UI manipulation will be exactly the same from application to application. So you can envision that the only difference between your applications, for example, is the names of the controls, so the labels, right? But everything stays the same, and still you cannot reuse it, so it's painful. Cannot be automated. It's not passable easily by other tools, so you cannot extract information on what's going to be changed when. Any kind of modification to the state and the behavior of the user interface requires you to recompile your code. So you have an executable, you just want to change the state that, let's say, when you're in operator mode, you want to make one more control available to the user. Well, you cannot do it without recompiling the code, which is, again, bad. And because of this, it's not source code control repositories friendly. Right? So this is the way how we do it. It's not very good. Maybe it's easy when you have one controller indicator, but the more you have of them and the more states you have, that becomes painful. How others do it? Well, a long time ago already, when Windows Presentation Foundation, for example, was introduced, and even before that, the industry agreed that a very good way to define how a user interface looks like and behaves is to use XML. And it's the go-to kind of, let's say, syntax. And you have many different versions now, depending on who is manufacturing the user interface layer or API in your language or in your environment. You have, for example, XAML. XAML is developed by Microsoft in .NET. You have Glade XML. You have Qt Designer. You have fXML, and you have so many more different notations of XML developed by different producers just to define the behavior of the user interface. So these, in general, we could call them UI or application markup languages. And these markup languages, the thing that they have in common is that they define the behavior of and the look of the user interface in a purely textual way in XML form. So here I have an example on the right where you define a button, you give it some kind of a name, width, height, alignment, background, what action should happen, what event should be triggered when the button is clicked, and you close off the button on the bottom here. Right? So this is easy to edit. It's structured, it's possible, it's scriptable. You can completely detach the way how the user interface looks from the way how your application behaves. Right? Because right now, you don't have to make, for example, you want to make a change to the user interface, you don't have to go into the code and compile everything, especially if it's a dynamic interpreted language, like Python, you can imagine. If Python is using something like this, then you can completely detach the way how code is working from the user interface. However, this was not available in LabVIEW. So we had this, we didn't have any kind of tool that would allow you to easily work with it, or we had tools, but they were limited in a sense. One thing to remember here is that we will not be able to go fully describe the user interface like this with an XML, even if we wanted to implement that in LabVIEW, because, well, our user interfaces are still heavily tied together with code. So there is no breaking that apart. We cannot just make everything text editable. However, we can try to make it, more user-friendly. We can try to shift the balance a little bit. So the answer to that is the UI Manager. It's a tool that I created for doing specifically that. So passing an XML document and extracting from the XML document the properties, so the user interface properties that you're interested in, and applying these user interface properties to the controls you're interested in. So it's XML based. It provides a programmatic API, but also it provides a UI Manager tool for LabVIEW. You can work with any VI server controls. You can work with any VI server properties, and it's user accessible because it's plugin based. Right? So you install essentially this tool, you get the API, you get the palette, and you get the tool into LabVIEW tools, right? So in the menus, and it allows you to easily capture essentially the state of your user interface, save that state in a text file, XML file. You can then edit that XML file in any kind of tool you want, like Notepad++, add the states that you're interested in, and essentially load it after that and apply these states to the user interface. And you're only working with the controls that you specify, and you're only working with the properties that you specify. So you can limit essentially the stuff that you capture to only the things that are actually important to you. The API for the tool looks like this. So here with the API, the things that you do is you can capture any user interface state. You can apply any user interface state. You can manipulate the plugins that are used for extensibility. So these UI interface properties, user interface properties, and you can export and import these things from an XML file, or you can pretty print the file and show it on the screen straight. So first of all, you obtain, then you modify the user interface, you capture a state, you modify the user interface again, you capture another state, and then you can swap between these states using the API. The tool that is available allows you to do exactly the same things as the API allows you to do. Is just using the API would still require you to go through this painful business of writing something to property nodes, reading something from property nodes, and then applying a state, doing exactly the same thing for a second time with new values, and then applying a state. So you don't want to do that. We need a tool that would make it a little bit easier, and that's why there is also this UI Manager tool, which is available in the Tools menu in LabVIEW. And here, you can point to any VI that you have loaded into the memory for that specific project that you're working with. So this is project-based. It understands what VIs you have in the project that you're working with. It allows you to point to an example that you want to work with, so any VI in the memory. Then you can specify the name by which you want, the name with which you want to capture the current state of that VI's front panel. So you can just specify that there is going to be default or state 1, state 2, etc. It doesn't matter. And then you can capture that state using the tool. And when you capture the state, then you will see here that the state that was created, the state name is default in the XML, and then you see control name. And the control name is a label, essentially, of the control. So the tool works based on labels of the controls. Right? So you look at all of the controls that you have on your user interface, you get their names, and then you work with the property plugins that you have available in the tool. So here you can see that the caption plugin was used, disabled enabled plugin was used, and the visible invisible plugin was used, and their values have been also captured using the tool. So then that means that you can essentially capture whatever properties you are actually working with, right? And then you get the states that you've captured available in the state selector. So the state selector will allow you to work with any of the states that you've captured before. Then you will be able to apply these states. If you are not satisfied with them, you can remove them. You can save this configuration to an XML file so that you can edit it in other tools, and you can load it from an XML file. Do you have any questions, guys, so far?
Can you do it? Yeah, so if I have a control from a specific control class, like a Boolean control,
yes.
The Boolean control has a specific Boolean text.
Yes.
Do I have to address the Boolean text in a specific way in this toolkit?
Yeah, so the thing is that every property that is available by default right now, if you're working with this hierarchy of classes, essentially, you have classes of controls, and the hierarchy is nested, right? You have many levels of the hierarchy. So essentially, a Boolean control is a control. So it inherits all of the properties that it has also from a control. The default plugins that are provided work on the level of a control. And they are specified that they are compatible with any control, essentially. If you want to work with Boolean text, for example, then you would need to create your own plugin that would work only with Boolean controls, and it would capture only that specific aspect of the Boolean control. So it's user extensible. However, you need to adapt that this property is capturing from a specific level in the hierarchy a specific property of that specific class. Right? Is that cool? Yeah. Anybody else? Any questions? Okay. So another thing here is that this is plugin based, and you can load your UI properties that you want to work with. So this name UIP stands for UI User Interface Property. You can load any of them you want at any moment, and you can do this in this second tab, second pane of the tool. Here you can add a user interface property, you can remove it, you can reload the default ones, because there is like 4 default ones, and they are available in the folder in LabVIEW folder in program files. So you can reload the default ones. You can also add your own plugins to that default folder. So that is, all of them are loaded from a specific location. So you can just add them there. And also there is an option here, like you asked the question, how do I work with a different property of a control? You just add, from a template, you add a new user interface property. And it's a class, it's a template class that you can then modify a little bit inside, and you're going to be able to work with that property. Yeah, so you see here the names of the classes that are loaded, and you see the paths to them. And this path is very long because it's just pointing to the default folder. And you have 4 default properties. The default properties, I essentially just decided that there will be 4, but you can give me feedback that you would want something more. I essentially decided on the ones that are most frequently used. So that is caption, which can be used for localizing or modifying the text of the controls on the screen. Disabled enable, so you can disable and gray out some controls on the screen. That's visible and invisible, and that's position. So those are the 4 things that are available by default, but there is nothing stopping you from adding your own. Okay. And this is the format of the XML document that is created by the tool and that is used in the API. Let me just wait until it loads on the other side so you can see it as well. Yeah, here it is. So it's just a standard XML document. You have a tag opening the user interface manager, and then you can have multiple tags for multiple states, and they are defined essentially with a name. Then each state, so one user interface manager can have multiple states. One state can have multiple controls, and they are also defined by the name. And here the name means the label of the control. So remember about that. If you want to modify your user interface and you're using this tool, remember not to modify the labels, because the labels are the way how these controls are recognized on the screen. You can modify, however, the caption. That's the intended way to, for example, do localization. And then each control can have multiple UIPs under it. Right? So you can decide that you want to change the caption, you want to disable it, you want to change the position, etc. And this is a structured document. It's easy to edit, so you can easily imagine a situation where you add another state. So you can just copy essentially an existing state, paste it in the document, and you have a new state. You just need to edit some of the values there. It's easily parsable, so you can use other tools to also create it. You can use other tools to go through it and do some modifications. So now you can imagine how difficult would it be in comparison to actually make those modifications to your VI front panel. And here you just make the modifications to the text document and you just apply that state. Right? It's scriptable and it's completely detached from the code. So if you are using the API in your application, you are loading the state from a file when your application starts, and you specify that you want to load, for example, the default state when your application starts, then you don't have to do any recompilation. You just modify the way how the default state looks in the file, and that's going to apply the configuration to your user interface. And you don't have to do any modifications to the VI itself. But you see here that there is only these 4 user interface properties, so you might want to add your own ones, right? And you do this using this custom plugin template user interface property. It inherits, so your template, your property will inherit from user interface property. And user interface property is nothing else than an abstract class that is basically empty inside, and it only provides the interface that you need to use for it to be pluggable to the tool, to the API. So the template gives you 5 methods. It's get state, set state. This is for working with VI server properties. The list compatible controls. So this essentially informs the tool, hey, these are the types of VI server classes that this property can work with. So for example, you mentioned Boolean control. Here you would specify that your UIP is compatible only with Boolean control. Right? The basic ones that I pointed to are only compatible. So the basic ones are compatible with all controls. So they provide a huge list of controls that they are compatible with. But if you create more specific ones, then they might only be compatible with one specific class. Then you have an options related to XML itself. So you can flatten the user interface property value to string, and you can unflatten it from string. And that is used when you want to export and import from the XML file. Why is it separated like this into basic and XML? Because if you don't want to use the XML, but instead you want to do everything in memory, then you will never need to go with your property through that step of flattening and unflattening it from a string. So that's why it's separated like this, because in a basic scenario, you actually only need to override these 3 methods. You only need to provide implementation for these 3 methods, and your properties will already work. They will just not be exportable and importable from a text file. If you want to make them exportable and importable from a text file, then you need to provide overrides for these methods as well. I'm going to give you an example of how can we do it in just a second. So there's going to be a tutorial for that. And these things, once you create your own UIPs, they can be placed anywhere in your PC. A good place to put them is next to the other UIPs in the default folder, because then that way they will be just loaded automatically. However, you can use the API to point to them and load them dynamically at any moment. And there is this tool in the UI Manager tool. So here you can create your UIPs using the press of a button. Just let me wait a second so you guys online see also what I'm talking about. Yeah, so here you can just press the new UIP, and it's going to create a UIP for you from a template. Okay. An easy example of how can this be used in code. This is just something that could look almost exactly the same. Let me wait until it loads for you guys remotely as well. Let's give it a second. Yeah, so this is an example of an application that this can look exactly the same for many applications. So that's why I'm showing you this. This is the usual flow how you use the API once you have this XML file available. So you obtain a user interface manager with no settings, just default. Then you load the XML from a file. Then you get the states that have been loaded from that file. Then you update some kind of a selector that allows you to programmatically select what kind of state the user interface should be in right now. And then you just apply that user interface state from the list of the ones that you have available. And with this kind of, let's say, standard approach, You can use this in any application, and you will give the user an option to swap between states programmatically. The states are name-based, it's string-based kind of mechanism. So when you capture a state and when you apply a state, you need to provide a string name for that state. If you provide the string name that existed before, then it's just going to be overridden in the tool. Okay, so let me show you a couple of examples how this can look. I hope it's going to be fast enough so you guys remotely can also see how it's working. So let me put this up. Or maybe let's just go to the examples. So these are examples. And the way how this works in the background. And the palette is installed with examples that you can just go to. They are available here. Once you install the palette using the package manager, you will have a button to go to the examples, and those will be the ones that I will be using right now. This remote connection is so slow. Wow. Okay, so here you have the button with the examples, and it puts you here in this location. And I can open it up in LabVIEW. So let me open existing and project. So I get these examples here. One is an example that swaps between different configurations of the user interface based on the data that you want to work with. Another one is very simple localization example with just one language, English so far, but you can easily modify the file to load multiple languages. I'm going to show you in a moment. Then you have multiple modes of the user interface. So admin mode and operator mode, and those change the way how the user interface looks like. And then you have just a rough example called the programmatic UI modes, which just swaps around different things on the screen. So let's start with the vice versa. So this one is just a rough example that just swaps around different values for different properties for elements on the screen. When I started, I get 4 states that I can jump between. One is all hidden, and I have state 1. It just changes the way the positions and the enabled, the disabled state. State 2, which just again modifies the same things, and some kind of default state where everything is visible, right? So basic configuration here. And the way how it looks like in the code, it's very similar to what you've seen on the slide. So I just load a specific file, I list the states that I have available in that file, and then I just swap between these states. Yeah. So that's example number 1. It's very rough. It doesn't show anything specific to a specific application, but you can easily imagine that you might want to have a user interface for your test scenario. And a user interface for your test might be in 2 modes, operator and admin. And you want to make different things available on the screen for an operator, and you want different things to be available for admin. Right? So you can easily swap between them. What to do when you want to add a third type of user? Well, you don't need to do anything to the application. You just add something to the XML file. Okay, so that's the second example. A third example, I have a simple user interface that I want to localize, right? Right now, the only language that I will have will be English. So let me run this. The only state that I have is English. But let me do actually some editing on the file. I want to add another language, and this file that I need to work with is this UI state local.xml. That's the one that I need to modify. So let's go to the file. Let me open it with Notepad++ to make it easier. Okay, and here I have the whole state. Right? So what do I need to do now? I just need to select the whole state. Let me wait until it loads for you guys on the other side. First century in the Skype connection. So yeah, you see here that I have state for English, and now I want to add a new language, let's say. I don't need to do anything to my app. I just need to copy and paste, let's say, lolcat lang. I have new language, lolcat language, and I change the captions for all of my controls. And remember, don't change the labels because the control needs to be still found somehow. So the label stays the same, the name stays the same. You change the value of the caption UIP. So I can here say lol boolean, lol file path, right? Let's say lol numeric control. And that's my new language, lolcat language. So let's save it now. Control save, and it should be working. And let me run the application one more time. Run. And here I have lolcat language available now as a new language. And let me wait again for you guys online to see. So I made the modifications, I loaded it again, and I have the lolcat language available. And I just click on the lolcat language, and it renames my controls. So it changes the captions on the fly, right? So you can easily do localization with this tool as well. Unfortunately, because LabVIEW is not very friendly to UTF, so you are limited here to UTF-8. You cannot have like a Chinese localization, unfortunately. Well, maybe with some additional modifications to the environment. If you enable UTF and LabVIEW, then it should be possible to have like a Chinese language there as well. The tool itself allows to do it, so it's a limitation of LabVIEW. And the last example that I wanted to show you is configuration settings. Configuration settings is just a way how you can swap between different kinds of things that you want to configure depending on what you select in the configuration tab, let's say. So you can have maybe in your application you have network configuration, some real-time target configuration, and so far the way how you needed to do it is, for example, you needed to create multiple tabs on your user interface, and you needed to swap between those tabs. Well, with this tool, you can just easily make different stuff visible and invisible on the screen. So here I have an application that allows you to configure sine amplitude and sine frequency. Like when I have sine amplitude, sine frequency, and when I click that I want to configure square, then I just make those invisible, and I make visible the square amplitude and square frequency. And if I want to configure triangle, then I just make invisible that, and I make visible triangle amplitude and frequency. And in the code, the generation looks as simple as possible. So I just use all of these terminals in the code like they are normally available. So the way how the UI operates does not impact the way how your code operates. So you guys remotely will see in just a second what I mean. When it switches to the code, yeah. So you see here that I just use the terminals and we have no problems with that. But they are visible or invisible on the UI, right? So this allows you to configure different parts of your UI to essentially behave differently in different configuration modes, let's say. And these are just simple examples of how you can use this toolkit. If you provide your own custom user interface plugins, then you can use it in even more advanced ways. I'm just going to show you a very simple example how you need to do it to create your own UIPs. You need to go to Tools in LabVIEW, Tools menu, and you need to click on UI Manager Tool. Come on. Once you click on UI Manager Tool, you need to go to UIP Definitions tab in the tool. And here you will have available this create and save a copy of template UIP class. So let's create and save a copy of the template. I'm going to save it on my desktop or somewhere like that. A new folder. And let's call it new plugin. And point to the current folder. And that has just created a copy of the template for me. It's a very simple and fast process. And now if I wanted to, even though that template doesn't do anything right now, I can already load it as another plugin to my UI Manager tool. So let me wait until it loads for you guys as well. Yeah. So I've created that, and I can already load it into the UI Manager tool. I just need to go to my desktop and new plugin. And here I just need to point to the template UIP class and click OK. And it's loaded from a new location, new template UIP. If I try to capture user interface state with that plugin, then it's not going to do anything intelligent, right? It's just empty inside. It's an abstract class. But if I put something inside of those methods, then I'm going to be able to capture them easily. I will also add some other tutorials for you guys how to create these plugins. I'm not going to do it here because the quality of the connection doesn't allow me to do it with normal speed. So I'm just going to prepare documents and videos for you guys how to do it correctly. But this is essentially, the mechanism is as simple as I could think of to make it. And that's pretty much all I wanted to share with you today. The summary of what you can do with this tool is very well described in this About pane. One more thing that I wanted to share with you. The tool is already available online. The thing that you need to look for is User Interface Manager and New Example Tool for LabVIEW 2016. If you search for this on Google or you search for this on our communities, you will find the link. And all of the documentation about the tool is here. The tool depends on two other packages that you need to install before the tool itself. So one of the packages is Extensible Session Framework. The second package is NI Dictionary. So you have links to both of these here on the page, and you can also download both of them on the bottom next to the tool itself. And the order of the installation isn't extremely important, so you can just install them in any order you want to, but you need to install all of them before you try to work with the tool. because otherwise it's not going to be able to find all of the dependencies and it's not going to run properly. On the page, you can also find the PDF summary of this presentation that I'm giving to you. And you can also find a video, 16 minutes video, just showing very roughly how you can use the tool, explaining in a similar way how I'm doing right now for you. Okay, and that's it. And let me know if you have any questions. Yeah?
So this is in the title of this toolkit. It said that it's a new toolkit for LabVIEW 2016.
Yeah.
Does it mean that it's not working with LabVIEW 2015, for example?
Yeah, the package itself is compiled and works only for LabVIEW 2016. There is no limitations in the code that it shouldn't work with the versions before. It's just that the dependencies on the other packages, well, the other packages are working on LabVIEW 2016. So if I wanted to make it work with previous versions of LabVIEW, I would need to recompile from the lowest level and rebuild the packages, all of the packages, for it to work with lower versions. And I just didn't have time to do it right now. But if you have a specific need that you need this for a customer that has only LabVIEW 2014, I think above LabVIEW 2012, I would say that this probably is going to work safely. So if you have a customer that needs it in LabVIEW 2012, then I can, make it available for previous versions. But for now, it's only LabVIEW 2016.
Another question I had during your presentation.
Yeah.
If you're modifying the XML as you did with Notepad++, let's say that I somehow make a mistake in the XML.
Yeah.
The toolkit recognizes and give me an error.
No, it's going to try to load the user interface manager. The first tag that it finds with user interface manager, it's going to load that. And then it's going to try to load all of the states. And then it's going to try to load all of the controls. And then it's going to try to load all of the UIPs. So as long as your mistake isn't so huge that it completely breaks that approach. So let's say that you forgot or you added some kind of new thing to the XML that is not recognized correctly, then it's just going to be ignored. So there is a set of mistakes that you can do that are just going to be ignored, and it's still going to work. However, there is some mistakes that if you really break it, then it's just going to tell you that it couldn't pass the XML. And that's going to be the error that it's going to return to you. So it depends on the severity of the mistake, essentially.
So if it ignores something, it will give me a message that it's not relevant. Something
it's just not going to load it for you, essentially. So if you have a look at the visualization of the XML in the tool versus the file on your hard drive, they might look differently. And that is because the visualization is created after loading is finished. It's not the rough file that is shown to you on the screen. So if you see that there are differences, that means you made a small mistake somewhere between these two. Any other questions, guys? Okay, and if you don't have any questions, then please just try to use the tool. Try to help me find all of the bugs that it has. And if you find anything, or you see some area for improvement, or you would like to see some plugins for me to add as default ones, then just please let me know. I am available for feedback all the time. You can put it on the web page, or you can just send an email directly to me about it. Ingo is typing something. Please just wait. Ingo, you want to ask a question? Cool. Thank you very much. Okay. So I think that's it. Thank you guys for attending. I'm looking forward to hearing from you after we finish. Bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.